you need is one thing. Incidentally, the only thing you can control, and that is a state of mind. A state of mind is something that is up to you. It cannot be purchased. It must be created. The most destructive fear. Fear of poverty is a state of mind, nothing else. But it is sufficient to destroy your chances of achievement in any undertaking. This fear paralyzes your ability to use reason, destroys the imagination, kills off self-reliance, undermines enthusiasm, discourages initiative, leads to uncertainty of purpose, encourages procrastination, wipes out enthusiasm, and makes self-control an impossibility. It takes the charm from your personality, destroys the possibility of accurate thinking, diverts concentration of effort. It defeats persistence, turns willpower into nothingness, destroys ambition, clouds the memory, and invites failure in every conceivable form. It kills love and assassinates the finer emotions of the heart, discourages friendship and invites disaster in 100 forms, leads to sleeplessness, misery, and unhappiness, and all this despite the obvious truth that you live in a world of overabundance of everything your heart could desire, with nothing standing between you and your desires except lack of a definite purpose. The fear of poverty is, without doubt, the most destructive of the 6 basic fears. It has been placed at the head of the list because it is the most difficult to master. The fear of poverty grew out of our inherited tendency to prey upon our fellow human beings economically. Nearly all animals lower than us are motivated by instinct, but their capacity to think is limited, and therefore they prey upon one another physically. We, with our superior sense of intuition, with the capacity to think and to reason, do not eat others bodily. Human beings get more satisfaction out of eating others financially. Humans are so avaricious that every conceivable law has been passed to safeguard us from one another. Nothing brings so much suffering and humility as poverty. Only those who have experienced poverty understand the full meaning of this. It is no wonder that we fear poverty. Through a long line of inherited experiences, we have learned for sure that some people cannot be trusted where matters of money and earthly possessions are concerned. So eager are we to possess wealth that we will acquire it in whatever manner we can, through legal methods if possible, through other methods if necessary or expedient. Self-analysis may disclose weaknesses that you do not like to acknowledge, but this form of examination is essential if you are going to demand of life more than mediocrity and poverty. Remember, as you check yourself point by point, that you are both the court and the jury, the prosecuting attorney and the attorney for the defense, and that you are both the plaintiff and the defendant. You are on trial. Face the facts squarely. Ask yourself definite questions and demand direct replies. When the examination is over, you will know more about yourself. If you do not feel that you can be an impartial judge, call upon someone who knows you well to serve as judge while you cross-examine yourself. You are after the truth. Get it, no matter at what the cost, even though it may temporarily embarrass you. The majority of people, if asked what they fear most, would reply, "I fear nothing." The reply would be inaccurate, because few people realize that they are bound, handicapped, whipped spiritually and physically through some form of fear. So subtle and deeply seated is the emotion of fear that you may go through life and never recognize its presence. Only a courageous analysis will disclose the presence of this universal enemy. When you begin such an analysis, search deeply into your character. The following is a list of the symptoms to look for. Symptoms of the fear of poverty. 1. Indifference. Commonly expressed through lack of ambition, willingness to tolerate poverty, and the acceptance of whatever compensation life may offer without protest. Also mental and physical laziness and lack of initiative, imagination, enthusiasm, and self-control. 2. Indecision. The habit of permitting others to do your thinking. Sitting on the fence. 3. Doubt. Generally expressed through alibis and excuses designed to cover up, explain away, or apologize for your failures. Sometimes expressed in the form of envy of those who are successful, or by criticizing them. 4. Worry. Usually expressed by finding fault with others, a tendency to spend beyond your income, neglect of personal appearance, scowling and frowning, nervousness, lack of poise, self-consciousness, and often the use of alcohol or drugs. 5. Overcaution. The habit of looking for the negative side of every circumstance. Thinking and talking about possible failure instead of concentrating on succeeding. Knowing all the roads to disaster, but never searching for the plans to avoid failure. Waiting for the right time to begin, until the waiting becomes a permanent habit. Remembering those who have failed and forgetting those who have succeeded. Seeing the hole in the donut, but overlooking the donut around the hole. 6. Procrastination. The habit of putting off until tomorrow that which should have been done last year, spending more time in creating excuses than it would take to do the job. This symptom is closely related to overcaution, doubt, and worry. Refusal to accept responsibility. Willingness to compromise rather than put up a fight. Compromising with difficulties instead of harnessing and using them as stepping stones to advancement. Bargaining with life for a penny instead of demanding prosperity, opulence, riches, contentment, and happiness. Planning what to do if you fail instead of burning all bridges and making retreat impossible. Weakness of, and often total lack of, self-confidence, definiteness of purpose, self-control, initiative, enthusiasm, ambition, thrift, and sound reasoning ability. Expecting poverty instead of demanding riches. Associating with those who accept poverty instead of seeking the company of those who demand and receive riches. Money talks. Some will ask, why did you write a book about money? Why measure riches in dollars alone? Some will believe, and rightly so, that there are other forms of riches more desirable than money. Yes, there are riches that cannot be measured in terms of dollars. But there are also millions of people who say, give me all the money I need, and I will find everything else I want. The major reason why I wrote this book on how to get money is that millions of men and women are paralyzed with the fear of poverty. What this sort of fear does to one was well described by Westbrook Pegler. Editor's comments. James Westbrook Pegler was a controversial newspaper columnist for the Chicago Daily News and the Washington Post. Although his career lasted into the 1960s, he was most widely read and quoted during the 1930s and 1940s. During that period, he went from being a public supporter of Franklin Roosevelt and the New Deal policies to the opposite end of the political spectrum, championing conservative points of view. Pegler was also the author of 3 books based on his columns, and in 1940 won the Pulitzer Prize for his expose of union racketeering. This is the end of the editor's comments. We continue with the article by Westbrook Pegler. Money is only clamshells or metal discs or scraps of paper, and there are treasures of the heart and soul which money cannot buy. But most people, being broke, are unable to keep this in mind and sustain their spirits. When a man is down and out and on the street, unable to get any job at all, something happens to his spirit, which can be observed in the droop of his shoulders, the set of his hat, his walk, and his gaze. He cannot escape a feeling of inferiority among people with regular employment, even though he knows they are definitely not his equals in character, intelligence, or ability. These people, even his friends, feel, on the other hand, a sense of superiority and regard him, perhaps unconsciously, as a casualty. He may borrow for a time, but not enough to carry on in his accustomed way, and he cannot continue to borrow very long. But borrowing in itself, when a man is borrowing merely to live, is a depressing experience, and the money lacks the power of earned money to revive his spirits. Of course, none of this applies to bums or habitual ne'er-do-wells, but only to men of normal ambitions and self-respect. Women in the same predicament must be different. We somehow do not think of women at all in considering the down-and-outers. They are scarce in the bread lines, they rarely are seen begging on the streets, and they are not recognizable in crowds by the same plain signs which identify busted men. Of course, I do not mean the shuffling hags of the city streets, who are the opposite number of the confirmed male bums. I mean reasonably young, decent, and intelligent women. There must be many of them, but their despair is not apparent. When a man is down and out, he has time on his hands for brooding. He may travel miles to see a man about a job and discover that the job is filled, or that it is one of those jobs with no base pay, but only a commission on the sale of some useless knick-knack which nobody would buy except out of pity. Turning that down, he finds himself back on the street with nowhere to go, but just anywhere. So he walks and walks. He gazes into store windows at luxuries which are not for him, and feels inferior and gives way to people who stop to look with an active interest. He wanders into the railroad station, or puts himself down in the library to ease his legs and soak up a little heat. But that isn't looking for a job, so he gets going again. He may not know it, but his aimlessness would give him away even if the very lines of his figure did not. He may be well dressed in the clothes left over from the days when he had a steady job, but the clothes cannot disguise the droop. He sees thousands of other people, bookkeepers or clerks or chemists or wagon hands, busy at their work, and envies them from the bottom of his soul. They have their independence, their self-respect and manhood, and he simply cannot convince himself that he is a good man too, though he argue it out and arrive at a favorable verdict hour after hour. It is just money which makes this difference in him. With a little money, he would be himself again. This is the end of the article by Westbrook Pegler. The second basic fear, the fear of criticism. Just how we originally came by this fear, no one can say definitely, but one thing is certain: we have it in a highly developed form. I am inclined to attribute the basic fear of criticism to that part of our inherited nature that prompts us not only to take away other people's goods and wares, but also to justify our actions by criticism of the character of others. It is well known that a thief will criticize the man from whom he steals, that politicians seek office not by displaying their own virtues and qualifications, but by running negative campaigns against their opponents. Designers and clothing manufacturers have not been slow to take advantage of this basic fear of criticism. Every season, styles change. Who establishes the styles? Certainly not the purchaser. It is the designers and manufacturers. Why do they change the styles so often? The answer is obvious. They change the styles so they can sell more clothes. The fear of criticism robs people of their initiative, destroys their power of imagination, limits their individuality, takes away their self-reliance, and does them damage in 100 other ways. Parents often do their children irreparable injury by criticizing them. The mother of one of my friends used to punish him with a switch almost daily, always completing the job with the statement, "You'll land in the penitentiary before you are 20. He was sent to a reformatory at the age of 17. Editor's comments. Modern psychotherapy is well aware of the circumstance that Hill describes in the preceding paragraph. In the chapters on autosuggestion and hypnosis, reference was made to childhood traumas that result in phobias, compulsive behaviors, fixations, or complexes. However, there are instances in which the implanting of a suggestion is much more subtle. Hypnotherapists have found that common phrases such as, "Don't you ever say no to me again," "I'm afraid she'll never get over it," or "You're just like your father," can hamper a person's abilities later in life if such phrases were said often enough, or at a time when a child was particularly vulnerable. This is the end of the editor's comments. Criticism is the one form of service of which everyone has too much. Everyone has a stock of it, which is handed out gratis whether called for or not. Your nearest relatives are often the worst offenders. It should be recognized as a crime. In reality, it is a crime of the worst nature for any parent to build inferiority complexes in the mind of a child through unnecessary criticism. Employers who understand human nature get the best there is in people not by criticism, but by constructive suggestion. Parents may accomplish the same results with their children. Criticism will plant fear in the human heart, or resentment, but it will not build love or affection. Symptoms of the fear of criticism. This fear is almost as universal as the fear of poverty, and its effects are just as fatal to personal achievement, mainly because this fear destroys initiative and discourages the use of imagination. The major symptoms of the fear are: 1. Self-consciousness, generally expressed through nervousness, timidity in conversation and in meeting strangers, awkward movements, and shifting of the eyes. 2. Lack of poise, expressed through lack of voice control, nervousness in the presence of others, poor posture, poor memory. 3. Personality weaknesses, lacking in firmness of decision, personal charm, and ability to express opinions definitely. The habit of sidestepping issues instead of meeting them squarely. Agreeing with others without careful examination of their opinions. 4. Inferiority complex, the habit of expressing your own self-approval as a means of covering up your feeling of inferiority. Using big words to impress others, often without knowing the real meaning of the words. Imitating others in dress, speech, and manners. Boasting of imaginary achievements, and acting superior to cover up the fact that you feel inferior. 5. Extravagance, the habit of trying to keep up with the Joneses and spending beyond your income. 6. Lack of initiative, failure to embrace opportunities for self-advancement, fear to express opinions, lack of confidence in your own ideas, giving evasive answers to questions asked by superiors, hesitancy of manner and speech, deceit in both words and deeds. 7. Lack of ambition, mental and physical laziness, lack of self-assertion, slowness in reaching decisions, being too easily influenced, the habit of accepting defeat without protest, or quitting an undertaking when opposed by others. Also the habit of criticizing others behind their backs and flattering them to their faces, suspicion of other people without cause, lack of tactfulness of manner and speech, and unwillingness to accept the blame for mistakes. The third basic fear, the fear of ill health. This fear may be traced to both physical and social heredity. It is closely associated with the causes of fear of old age and the fear of death. We fear ill health because of the terrible pictures that have been planted in our minds of what may happen if death should overtake us. We also fear it because of the economic toll that it may claim. One reputable physician estimated that 75% of all people who visit doctors are suffering with hypochondria, imaginary illness. It has been shown that the fear of disease, even when there is not the slightest cause for fear, often produces the physical symptoms of the disease feared. Powerful and mighty is the human mind. It builds or it destroys. Through a series of experiments, my staff proved how susceptible people are to the power of suggestion. We asked 3 acquaintances to visit separately with the victim. They were instructed to pose the question, "What ails you? You look terribly ill." The first questioner provoked a grin from him and a nonchalant, "Oh, nothing, I'm all right." The second questioner was answered with a statement, "I don't know exactly, but I do feel badly." The third questioner was met with the admission that the victim was actually feeling ill. Editor's comment. Hill's experiment is one that you do not want to carry too far. It is not that different from the principle behind certain religious sects whose members take vengeance on their enemies by hexing or placing a spell on a victim. The spell only works because the victim believes that spells can be cast and that it is possible he or she could be hexed. When the hex victim is informed that someone has cast a spell on them, they accept that it is possible, and their mind does the rest. The same theory operated when Hill's associate was told 3 times that he looked ill. He believed it was possible. Being told 3 times was convincing, and his mind went to work and made it so. This is the end of the editor's comment. There is overwhelming evidence that disease sometimes begins in the form of negative thought impulse. Such thoughts may be planted in your mind by suggestion or created by you in your own mind. Doctors send patients to new climates for their health because a change of mental attitude is necessary. The seed of fear of ill health lives in every human mind. Worry, fear, discouragement, or disappointment can cause this seed to germinate and grow. Symptoms of the fear of ill health. The symptoms of this almost universal fear are: 1. Autosuggestion. The habit of negative use of self-suggestion by looking for and expecting to find symptoms of all kinds of disease. Enjoying your imaginary illness and speaking of it as being real. The habit of trying fads and isms recommended by others as having therapeutic value. Talking to others of operations, accidents, and other forms of illness. Experimenting with diets, physical exercises, weight loss systems without professional guidance. Trying home remedies, patent medicines, and quack remedies. 2. Hypochondria, a medical term for imaginary disease. The habit of excessively talking about illness, and by concentrating the mind on disease, you begin to expect it to happen to you. Nothing that comes in bottles can cure this condition. It is brought on by negative thinking, and nothing but positive thought can cure it. Hypochondria is said to do as much damage on occasion as the real disease might do. 3. Exercise. Fear of ill health often interferes with proper physical exercise and results in overweight. 4. Susceptibility. Fear of ill health breaks down your natural resistance, which makes you susceptible to real disease. The fear of ill health is often related to the fear of poverty, especially in the case of the hypochondriac, who constantly worries about the possibility of having to pay doctor's bills, hospital bills, etc. This type of person spends much time preparing for sickness, talking about death, saving money for cemetery plots, burial expenses, and such. 5. Self-coddling. The habit of seeking sympathy. The habit of feigning illness to cover your laziness or to serve as an alibi for lack of ambition. People often resort to this trick to avoid work. 6. Intemperance. The habit of using alcohol or drugs to destroy pain instead of eliminating the cause. 7. The habit of reading about illness and worrying over the possibility of being stricken by it. The fourth basic fear, the fear of loss of love. Jealousy and other similar forms of neurosis grow out of our fear of the loss of love of someone. This fear is the most painful of all the 6 basic fears. It probably plays more havoc with the body and mind than any of the other basic fears. Editor's comment. By way of introduction to each of the 6 basic fears, Napoleon Hill usually postulates how the fear originated in humans. In the original edition of this book, he suggested that the fear of loss of love may have started with prehistoric man's habit of stealing his neighbor's mate and taking liberties with her whenever he could. Though amusing, this theory does not take into account that women fear the loss of a love just as profoundly as men do, and both men and women fear losing the love of not just their mates, but also of family members and others with whom they are close. How the emotion of love originated may remain a mystery, but there is no mystery about how we feel when we lose it. This is the end of the editor's comment. The fourth basic fear, the fear of loss of love. Jealousy and other similar forms of neurosis grow out of our fear of the loss of love of someone. This fear is the most painful of all the 6 basic fears. It probably plays more havoc with the body and mind than any of the other basic fears. Editor's comment. By way of introduction to each of the 6 basic fears, Napoleon Hill usually postulates how the fear originated in humans. In the original edition of this book, he suggested that the fear of loss of love may have started with prehistoric man's habit of stealing his neighbor's mate and taking liberties with her whenever he could. Though amusing, this theory does not take into account that women fear the loss of a love just as profoundly as men do, and both men and women fear losing the love of not just their mates, but also of family members and others with whom they are close. How the emotion of love originated may remain a mystery, but there is no mystery about how we feel when we lose it. This is the end of the editor's comment. Symptoms of the fear of loss of love. The distinguishing symptoms of this fear are 1. Jealousy. The habit of being suspicious of friends and loved ones. The habit of accusing wife or husband of infidelity without grounds. General suspicion of everyone and absolute faith in no one. 2. Fault-finding. The habit of finding fault with friends, relatives, business associates, and loved ones upon the slightest provocation, or without any cause whatsoever. 3. Gambling. The habit of gambling, stealing, cheating, and otherwise taking hazardous chances to provide money for loved ones, in the belief that love can be bought. The habit of spending beyond your means, or incurring debts to provide gifts for loved ones in order to make a good impression. Also insomnia, nervousness, lack of persistence, weakness of will, lack of self-control, lack of self-reliance, bad temper. The fifth basic fear, the fear of old age. In the main, this fear grows out of 2 sources. First, the thought that old age may bring with it poverty. Second is the concern that many have for what may await them in the world beyond. The most common cause of fear of old age is associated with the possibility of poverty. Poorhouse is not a pretty word. It throws a chill into the mind of every person who faces the possibility of having to spend declining years having to live on some form of charity. The possibility of ill health, which is more common as people grow older, is also a contributing cause of this common fear of old age, as is concern about diminishing sexuality. Another contributing cause of the fear of old age is the possibility of loss of freedom and independence. as old age may bring with it the loss of both physical and economic freedom. Symptoms of the fear of old age. The most common symptoms of this fear are 1. Lack of enthusiasm. The tendency to slow down and develop an inferiority complex, falsely believing you are slipping because of age. The habit of killing off initiative, imagination, and self-reliance by falsely believing you are too old to exercise these qualities. 2. Self-consciousness of speech. The habit of speaking apologetically of yourself as being old merely because you have reached the age of 40 or 50, instead of reversing the rule and expressing gratitude for having reached the age of wisdom and understanding. 3. Inappropriate dress and action. Trying to appear much younger than your age by going overboard in your attempt to keep up with the style and mannerisms of youth. The sixth basic fear. The fear of death. To some, this is the cruelest of all the basic fears. The reason is obvious. The terrible pangs of fear associated with the thought of death, in the majority of cases, may be charged to religious fanaticism. So-called heathens are less afraid of death than the more civilized. For hundreds of millions of years, we have been asking the still unanswered questions, where did I come from? And where am I going? During the darker ages of the past, the more cunning and crafty were not slow to offer the answer to these questions for a price. Come into my tent, embrace my faith, accept my dogmas, and I will give you a ticket that will admit you straight into heaven when you die, says the religious leader. Remain out of my tent, says the same leader, and the devil will take you and burn you throughout eternity. The thought of eternal punishment destroys interest in life and makes happiness impossible. While the religious leader may not actually be able to provide safe conduct into heaven or send you to hell, the possibility of the latter seems terrible. The very thought of it takes hold of the imagination in such a realistic way that it paralyzes reason and sets up the fear of death. The fear of death is not as common now as it was during the age when there were no great colleges and universities. People of science have turned the spotlight of truth upon the world, and this truth is rapidly freeing men and women from this terrible fear of death. The young men and women who attend the colleges and universities are not easily impressed by fire and brimstone. Through knowledge, the fears of the dark ages that grip the mind have been dispelled. The entire world is made up of only four things: time, space, energy, and matter. In elementary physics, we learn that neither matter nor energy can be created or destroyed. Both matter and energy can be transformed, but neither can be destroyed. Life is energy, if it is anything. If neither energy nor matter can be destroyed, of course, life itself cannot be destroyed. Life, like other forms of energy, may be passed through various processes of transition or change, but it cannot be destroyed. Death is mere transition. And if death is not mere change or transition, then nothing comes after death except a long, eternal, peaceful sleep. And sleep is nothing to be feared. If you can accept the logic of this, you may forever wipe out your fear of death. Symptoms of the fear of death. The general symptoms of this fear are 1. The habit of thinking about dying instead of making the most of life. This is generally due to lack of purpose or lack of a suitable occupation. This fear is more prevalent among the aged, but sometimes the more youthful are victims of it. The greatest of all remedies for the fear of death is a burning desire for achievement, backed by useful service to others. A busy person seldom has time to think about dying. A busy person finds life too thrilling to worry about death. 2. Sometimes the fear of death is closely associated with the fear of poverty, where death would leave loved ones poverty-stricken. 3. In other cases, the fear of death is caused by illness and the breakdown of physical body resistance. 4. The most common causes of the fear of death are ill health, poverty, lack of appropriate occupation, disappointment over love, insanity, and religious fanaticism. The disaster of worry and destructive thinking. Worry is a state of mind based upon fear. It works slowly but persistently. It is insidious and subtle. Step by step, it digs itself in until it paralyzes the reasoning faculty and destroys self-confidence and initiative. Worry is a form of sustained fear caused by indecision. Therefore, it is a state of mind that can be controlled. An unsettled mind is helpless. Indecision makes an unsettled mind. Most individuals lack the willpower to reach decisions promptly and to stand by them after they have been made. We do not worry over conditions once we have reached a decision to follow a definite line of action. I once interviewed a man who was sentenced to be electrocuted 2 hours later. The condemned man was the calmest of the 8 men who were in the death cell with him. His calmness prompted me to ask him how it felt to know that he was going into eternity in a short while. With a smile of confidence on his face, he said, "It feels fine. Just think, brother, my troubles will soon be over. I've had nothing but trouble all my life. It has been a hardship to get food and clothing. Soon, I will not need these things. I have felt fine ever since I learned for certain that I must die. I made up my mind then to accept my fate in good spirit." As he spoke, he devoured a dinner sufficient for 3 men, eating every mouthful of the food brought to him, and apparently enjoying it as much as if no disaster awaited him. Decision gave this man resignation to his fate. Decision can also prevent one's acceptance of undesired circumstances. Through indecision, the 6 basic fears become translated into a state of worry. Relieve yourself forever of the fear of death by reaching a decision to accept death as an inescapable event. Eliminate the fear of old age by reaching a decision to accept it not as a handicap, but as a great blessing that carries with it wisdom, self-control, and understanding. Master the fear of loss of love by reaching a decision to get along without love, if that is necessary. Defeat the fear of criticism by reaching a decision not to worry about what other people think, do, or say. Overcome the fear of ill health by the decision to forget symptoms. And whip the fear of poverty by reaching a decision to get along with whatever wealth you can accumulate without worry. Kill the habit of worry in all its forms by reaching a general blanket decision that nothing life has to offer is worth the price of worry. With this decision will come poise, peace of mind, and calmness of thought, which will bring happiness. If your mind is filled with fear, you not only destroy your own chances of intelligent action, but you transmit these destructive vibrations to the minds of all who come into contact with you, and you destroy their chances too. Even a dog or a horse knows when its master lacks courage. It will pick up the vibrations of fear given off by its master and behave accordingly. The vibrations of fear pass from one mind to another just as quickly and as surely as the sound of the human voice passes from the broadcasting station to a radio receiver. The person who constantly speaks of negative or destructive thoughts is practically certain to experience the results of those words in the form of destructive feedback. But even negative thoughts without words will come back to you. The release of destructive thought impulses alone also produces feedback in more ways than one. First, and perhaps most important to be remembered, the person who releases thoughts of a destructive nature must suffer damage through the breaking down of creative imagination. Secondly, the presence in the mind of any destructive emotion develops a negative personality, which repels people and often converts them into antagonists. The third source of damage is that negative thoughts not only affect others, but they also embed themselves in the subconscious mind of the person releasing them and there become a part of that person's character. Your business in life is to achieve success. To be successful, you must find peace of mind, acquire the material needs of life, and above all, attain happiness. All of these indications of success begin in the form of thought impulses. You control your own mind. You have the power to feed it whatever thought impulses you choose. With this goes the responsibility of using your mind constructively. You are the master of your own earthly destiny, just as surely as you have the power to control your own thoughts. You may influence, direct, and eventually control your own environment, making your life what you want it to be. Or you may neglect to make your life what you want, and you will be adrift on the seas of circumstance, where you will be tossed like a wood chip on the waves of the ocean. The Devil's Workshop. In addition to the 6 basic fears, there is another evil by which people suffer. It constitutes a rich soil in which the seeds of failure grow abundantly. It is so subtle that its presence often is not detected. It is more deeply rooted and more often fatal than all of the 6 fears. For want of a better name, let us call this evil susceptibility to negative influences. Those who accumulate great riches always protect themselves against negative influences. The poverty-stricken never do. Those who succeed in any calling must prepare their minds to resist such influences. If you are reading this book to learn how to grow rich, you should examine yourself very carefully to determine whether you are susceptible to negative influences. If you neglect this self-analysis, you will give up your right to attain the object of your desires. Make your analysis searching. As you read the following questions, be tough on yourself. Go at the task as carefully as you would if you were searching for any other enemy you knew was waiting to ambush you. You must deal with your own faults as you would with a real and serious enemy. You can easily protect yourself against real enemies because there are laws, police, and courts to deal with them. But this 7th basic evil is more difficult to master because it strikes when you are not aware of its presence, when you are asleep, and while you are awake. Moreover, its weapon is intangible because it consists of merely a state of mind. Negative influences are also dangerous because they come in so many different forms. Sometimes they enter the mind through the well-meant words of your friends and relatives. At other times they come from within, through your own mental attitude. Always, it is as deadly as poison, even though it may not kill as quickly. How to protect yourself against negative influences. To protect yourself against negative influences, whether of your own making or the result of negative people around you, recognize that your willpower is your defense. You must put it into constant use until it builds a wall of immunity against negative influences in your own mind. Recognize that you and every other human being are, by nature, lazy, indifferent, and susceptible to all suggestions that reinforce your weaknesses. Recognize that you are, by nature, susceptible to all of the 6 basic fears, and you must set up habits to counteract all these fears. Recognize that negative influences often work on you through your subconscious mind and are therefore difficult to detect. Keep your mind closed against all people who depress or discourage you in any way. Clean out your medicine chest and stop pandering to colds, aches, pains, and imaginary illness. Deliberately seek the company of people who influence you to think and act for yourself. Do not expect troubles, as they have a tendency not to disappoint. Without doubt, the most common weakness of all human beings is the habit of leaving their minds open to the negative influences of other people. This weakness is all the more damaging because most people do not even know they do it. The following list of questions is designed to help you see yourself as you really are. You should read through the list now. Then set aside a day when you can give adequate time to go through the list again and thoroughly answer each question. When you do this, I advise that you read the questions and state your answers aloud so you can hear your own voice. This will make it easier for you to be truthful with yourself. Self-analysis questions. Do you complain often of feeling bad? And if so, what is the cause? Do you find fault with other people at the slightest provocation? Do you frequently make mistakes in your work? And if so, why? Are you sarcastic and offensive in your conversation? Do you deliberately avoid the association of anyone? And if so, why? Do you suffer frequently with indigestion? If so, what is the cause? Does life seem futile and the future hopeless to you? Do you like your occupation? If not, why? Do you often feel self-pity? And if so, why? Are you envious of those who excel you? To which do you devote most time, thinking of success or of failure? Are you gaining or losing self-confidence as you grow older? Do you learn something of value from all mistakes? Are you permitting some relative or acquaintance to worry you? If so, why? Are you sometimes excited about life and at other times in the depths of despondency? Who has the most inspiring influence upon you, and for what reason? Do you tolerate negative or discouraging influences that you could avoid? Are you careless of your personal appearance? If so, when and why? Have you learned how to ignore your troubles by being too busy to be annoyed by them? Would you call yourself a spineless weakling if you permitted others to do your thinking for you? How many preventable disturbances annoy you, and why do you tolerate them? Do you resort to alcohol, drugs, cigarettes, or other compulsions to quiet your nerves? If so, why do you not try willpower instead? Does anyone nag you? And if so, for what reason? Do you have a definite major purpose? And if so, what is it, and what plan do you have for achieving it? Do you suffer from any of the 6 basic fears? If so, which ones? Have you developed a method to shield yourself against the negative influence of others? Do you use autosuggestion to make your mind positive? Which do you value most, your material possessions or your privilege of controlling your own thoughts? Are you easily influenced by others against your own judgment? Has today added anything of value to your stock of knowledge or state of mind? Do you face squarely the circumstances that make you unhappy, or do you sidestep the responsibility? Do you analyze all mistakes and failures and try to profit by them, or do you take the attitude that this is not your duty? Can you name 3 of your most damaging weaknesses? What are you doing to correct them? Do you encourage other people to bring their worries to you for sympathy? Do you choose, from your daily experiences, lessons or influences that aid in your personal advancement? Does your presence have a negative influence on other people as a rule? What habits of other people annoy you most? Do you form your own opinions, or do you permit yourself to be influenced by other people? Have you learned how to create a mental state of mind with which you can shield yourself against all discouraging influences? Does your occupation inspire you with faith and hope? Are you conscious of possessing spiritual forces of sufficient power to enable you to keep your mind free from all forms of fear? Does your religion help to keep your mind positive? Do you feel it your duty to share other people's worries? If so, why? If you believe that birds of a feather flock together, what have you learned about yourself by studying the friends whom you attract? What connection, if any, do you see between the people with whom you associate most closely and any unhappiness you may experience? Could it be possible that some person whom you consider to be a friend is, in reality, your worst enemy because of his or her negative influence on your mind? By what rules do you judge who is helpful and who is damaging to you? Are your intimate associates mentally superior or inferior to you? How much time out of every 24 hours do you devote to your occupation, sleep, play and relaxation, acquiring useful knowledge, plain wasted time? Who among your acquaintances encourages you most, cautions you most, discourages you most? What is your greatest worry? Why do you tolerate it? When others offer you free, unsolicited advice, do you accept it without question, or do you analyze their motive? What, above all else, do you most desire? Do you intend to acquire it? Are you willing to subordinate all other desires for this one? How much time daily do you devote to acquiring it? Do you change your mind often? If so, why? Do you usually finish everything you begin? Are you easily impressed by other people's business or professional titles, college degrees, or wealth? Are you easily influenced by what other people think or say about you? Do you cater to people because of their social or financial status? Whom do you believe to be the greatest person living? In what respect is this person superior to yourself? How much time have you devoted to studying and answering these questions? At least one day is necessary for the analysis and the answering of the entire list. If you have answered all these questions truthfully, you know more about yourself than the majority of people. Study the questions carefully. Come back to them once each week for several months, and be astounded at the amount of additional knowledge of great value to yourself you will have gained by the simple method of answering the questions truthfully. If you are not certain about the answers to some of the questions, seek the counsel of those who know you well, especially those who have no motive in flattering you, and see yourself through their eyes. The experience will be astonishing. The one thing over which you have absolute control. You have absolute control over only one thing, and that is your thoughts. This is the most significant and inspiring of all facts known to humans. It reflects our divine nature. This ability to control your thoughts is the sole means by which you may control your own destiny. If you fail to control your own mind, you may be sure you will control nothing else. Your mind is your spiritual estate. Protect and use it with the care to which divine royalty is entitled. You were given your willpower for this purpose. Unfortunately, there is no legal protection against those who, by design or through ignorance, poison the minds of others with negative suggestion. Those with negative minds tried to convince Thomas A. Edison that he could not build a machine that would record and reproduce the human voice, because, they said, no one else has ever produced such a machine. Edison did not believe them. He knew that the mind could produce anything the mind could conceive and believe. That knowledge was the thing that lifted the great Edison above the common herd. Men with negative minds told F.W. Woolworth he would go broke trying to run a store on 5 and 10-cent sales. He did not believe them. He knew that he could do anything within reason if he backed his plans with faith. Exercising his right to keep the negative suggestions of others out of his mind, he piled up a fortune of more than $100 million. Doubting Thomases scoffed scornfully When Henry Ford tried out his first crudely built automobile on the streets of Detroit, some said the thing would never become practical. Others said no one would pay money for such a contraption. Ford said, "I'll belt the earth with dependable motor cars." And he did. For the benefit of those seeking vast riches, let it be remembered that practically the sole difference between Henry Ford and a majority of workers is this: Ford had a mind, and he controlled it. The others have minds that they do not try to control. Mind control is the result of self-discipline and habit. You either control your mind, or it controls you. There is no halfway compromise. The most practical method for controlling your mind is the habit of keeping it busy with a definite purpose, backed by a definite plan. Study the records of those who achieve noteworthy success, and you will see that they have control over their own minds, and that they exercise that control and direct it toward the attainment of definite objectives. Without this control, success is not possible. 55 Famous Alibis by Old Man If. People who do not succeed have one distinguishing trait in common. They know all the reasons for failure and have what they believe to be airtight alibis to explain away their own lack of achievement. Some of these alibis are clever, and a few of them are justifiable by the facts. But alibis cannot be used for money. The world wants to know only one thing: have you achieved success? A character analyst compiled a list of the most commonly used alibis. As you read the list, examine yourself carefully and determine how many of these alibis you use. Remember, the philosophy presented in this book makes every one of these alibis obsolete. If I didn't have a wife and family. If I had enough pull. If I had money. If I had a good education. If I could get a job. If I had good health. If I only had time. If times were better. If other people understood me. If conditions around me were only different. If I could live my life over again. If I did not fear what they would say. If I had been given a chance. If I now had a chance. If other people didn't have it in for me. If nothing happens to stop me. If only I were younger. If I only could do what I want. If I had been born rich. If I could meet the right people. If I had the talent that some people have. If I dared to assert myself. If only I had embraced past opportunities. If people didn't get on my nerves. If I didn't have to keep house and look after the children. If I could save some money. If the boss only appreciated me. If I only had somebody to help me. If my family understood me. If I lived in a big city. If I could just get started. If I were only free. If I had the personality of some people. If I were not so fat. If my real talents were known. If I could just get a break. If I could only get out of debt. If I hadn't failed. If I only knew how. If everybody wasn't against me. If I didn't have so many worries. If I could marry the right person. If people weren't so dumb. If my family were not so extravagant. If I were sure of myself. If luck were not against me. If I had not been born under the wrong star. If it were not true that what is to be will be. If I did not have to work so hard. If I hadn't lost my money. If I lived in a different neighborhood. If I didn't have a past. If I only had a business of my own. If other people would only listen to me. If, and this is the greatest of them all, If I had the courage to see myself as I really am, I would find out what is wrong with me and correct it. And I know that something must be wrong with the way I have done things, or I would already have the success that I desire. I recognize that something must be wrong with me, otherwise I would have spent more time analyzing my weaknesses and less time building alibis to cover them. Building alibis to explain away failure is a national pastime. The habit is as old as the human race and is fatal to success. Why do people cling to their pet alibis? The answer is obvious. They defend their alibis because they create them. Your alibi is the child of your own imagination. It is human nature to defend your own brainchild. Building alibis is a deeply rooted habit. Habits are difficult to break, especially when they provide justification for something we do. Plato had this truth in mind when he said, "The first and best victory is to conquer self. To be conquered by self is, of all things, the most shameful and vile." Another philosopher had the same thought in mind when he said, "It was a great surprise to me when I discovered that most of the ugliness I saw in others was but a reflection of my own nature." Elbert Hubbard, philosopher, author, publisher of the Fra magazine, and founder of the Roy Crofters Community of Artists, said, "It has always been a mystery to me why people spend so much time deliberately fooling themselves by creating alibis to cover their weaknesses. If used differently, this same time would be sufficient to cure the weakness. Then no alibis would be needed." In parting, I would remind you that life is a checkerboard, and the player opposite you is time. If you hesitate before moving, or neglect to move promptly, your men will be wiped off the board by time. You are playing against a partner who will not tolerate indecision. Previously, you may have had a logical excuse for not having forced life to come through with whatever you asked. That alibi is now obsolete, because you are in possession of the master key that unlocks the door to life's riches. The master key is intangible, but it is powerful. It is the privilege of creating, in your own mind, a burning desire for a definite form of riches. There is no penalty for the use of this key, but there is a price you must pay if you do not use it. The price is failure. There is a reward of stupendous proportions if you put the key to use. It is the satisfaction that will come to you when you conquer self and force life to pay whatever is asked. The reward is worthy of your effort. Will you make the start and be convinced? "If we are related," said the immortal Emerson, "we shall meet." In closing, may I borrow his thought and say, if we are related, we have, through these pages, met. Remember that your real wealth can be measured not by what you have, but by what you are.
To be free and flexible and creative was really essential to what I wanted to make, and I didn't find a platform that did that other than Wix. Hi, I'm Liv. I run Double Breaths, a print and design studio in Brighton, UK. I chose Wix for my business because of its massive scope for functionality and freedom of creation. Everything I create at Double is visual. So for me, those customizable elements like the hovers and the little animations, the additional bits of coding, the physicality of the actual process of printing really reflects me. From a business perspective, it was really exciting. Directing people to that site was going to give them everything that they needed.
played an important part in transmuting my burning desire into reality. They were 1. The Bible, 2. Think and Grow Rich, and 3. The Secret of the Ages. My greatest inspiration comes from reading the Bible. If you know what you want, you are more apt to recognize it when you see it. When you read a book, for example, you will recognize opportunities to help you get what you want. S.B. Fuller carried with him the invisible talisman with the initials PMA imprinted on one side and NMA on the other. He turned the PMA side up, and amazing things happened. He was able to bring into reality ideas that were formerly mere daydreams. Now, the important thing to notice here is that S.B. Fuller started life with fewer advantages than most of us have, but he chose a big goal and headed for it. Of course, the choice of goal was individual. In these times and in this country, you still have your personal right to say, "This is what I choose. This is what I want most to accomplish." And unless your goal is against the laws of God or society, you can achieve it. You have everything to gain and nothing to lose by trying. Success is achieved and maintained by those who keep trying with PMA. What you try for is up to you. Not everyone would care to be an S.B. Fuller, responsible for large manufacturing concerns. Not everyone would choose to pay the costly price of being a great artist. To many, the riches of life are quite different. A skill in day-to-day living which adds up to a happy, love-filled life is success. You can have this and other riches too. The choice is yours. But whether success to you means becoming rich as it did to S.B. Fuller, or the discovery of a new element in chemistry, or the creation of a piece of music, or the growing of a rose, or the nurturing of a child, no matter what success means to you, the invisible talisman with the initials PMA emblazoned on one side and NMA on the other can help you achieve it. You attract the good and desirable with PMA. You repel them with NMA. Every adversity has the seed of an equivalent or greater benefit. But what if I have a physical handicap? How can a change of attitude help me, you may ask? Perhaps the story of Tom Dempsey, a boy who was disabled at birth, will give you your answer. Tom was born without half a right foot and only a stub of a right arm. As a boy, he wanted to engage in sports as the other boys did. He had a burning desire to play football. Because of this desire, his parents had an artificial foot made for him. It was made of wood. The wooden foot was encased in a special stubby football shoe. Hour after hour, day after day, Tom would practice kicking the football with his wooden foot. He would try and keep on trying to make field goals at greater and greater distances. He became so proficient that he was hired by the New Orleans Saints. The screams of 66,910 football fans could be heard throughout the entire United States when, within the last 2 seconds of the game, Tom Dempsey, with his crippled leg, kicked a record-breaking 63-yard field goal. It was the longest field goal ever kicked in a professional football game. It gave the Saints a winning score of 19-17 over the Detroit Lions. "We were beaten by a miracle," said Detroit coach Joseph Schmidt. And to many, it was a miracle, an answer to a prayer. Tom Dempsey didn't kick that field goal. God kicked it, said Lion linebacker Wayne Walker. Interesting. But what does the Tom Dempsey story mean to me, you may ask? Our response would be very little, unless you develop the habit of recognizing, relating, assimilating, and using universal principles and adopt them as your very own. Then follow through with desirable action. And what are the principles you could apply from the Tom Dempsey story, whether or not you are physically disabled? They can be learned and applied by children and adults. Greatness comes to those who develop a burning desire to achieve high goals. Success is achieved and maintained by those who try and keep on trying with PMA. To become an expert achiever in any human activity, it takes practice, practice, practice. Effort and work can become fun when you establish specific desirable goals. With every adversity, there is a seed of an equivalent or greater benefit for those who are motivated with PMA to become achievers. Man's greatest power lies in the power of prayer. To learn and apply these principles, turn up your invisible talisman to the PMA side. When Henley wrote the poetic lines, "I am the master of my fate, I am the captain of my soul," he could have informed us that we are the masters of our fate because we are masters first of our attitudes. Our attitudes shape our future. This is a universal law. The poet could have told us with great emphasis that this law works whether the attitudes are destructive or constructive. The law states that we translate into physical reality the thoughts and attitudes which we hold in our minds, no matter what they are. We translate into reality thoughts of poverty just as quickly as we do thoughts of riches. But when our attitude toward ourselves is big, and our attitude toward others is generous and merciful, we attract big and generous portions of success. A truly great man. Consider the example of Henry J. Kaiser, a truly successful person because his attitude toward himself is big. Companies identified with the name Henry J. Kaiser hold assets of more than $1 billion. Because he is generous and merciful to others, the speechless have been made to talk, the crippled have been restored to useful lives, and hundreds of thousands of persons have received hospital care at a very low cost. All this grew from seeds of thought planted within him by his mother. Mary Kaiser gave her son Henry the priceless gift. She also taught him to apply the greatest value in life. 1. The priceless gift. After her day's work, Mary Kaiser would spend hours as a volunteer nurse helping the unfortunate. Often she said to her son, "Henry, nothing is ever accomplished without work. If I leave you nothing else but the will to work, I will have left you the priceless gift, the joy of work." 2. The greatest value in life. It was my mother, said Mr. Kaiser, who first taught me some of the greatest values in life. Among these were the love of people and the importance of serving others. Loving people and serving them, she used to say, is the greatest value in life. Henry J. Kaiser knows the power of PMA. He knows what it can do in his life and for his country. He also knows the force of NMA. During World War II, he built over 1,500 ships with such rapidity that he startled the world. When he said, "We can construct a Liberty ship every 10 days," the experts said, "It can't be done. It's impossible." Yet Kaiser did it. Those who believe they can't repel the positive. They use the negative side of their talisman. Those who believe they can repel the negative. They use the positive side. That is why we must be cautious when we use this talisman. Its PMA side can get for you all the rich blessings of life. It can help you to overcome your difficulties and to discover your strengths. It can help you step out ahead of your competitors. And, as with Kaiser, it can turn what others say is impossible into reality. But the NMA side is just as powerful. Instead of attracting happiness and success, it can attract despair and defeat. Like all power, the talisman is dangerous if we don't use it properly. How the force of NMA repels. There's a very interesting story which illustrates how the force of NMA repels. It comes out of one of the southern states. There, where wood-burning fireplaces are still used to heat homes, lived a woodcutter who also was an unsuccessful person. For more than 2 years, he had supplied a certain homeowner with firewood. The woodcutter knew that the logs could not be larger than 7 inches in diameter if they were to fit this particular fireplace. On one occasion, this old customer ordered a cord of wood, but was away when it was delivered. On arriving home, he discovered that most of the wood was larger than the specified size. He called the woodcutter and asked him to have the oversized logs exchanged or split. "I can't do that," said the wood dealer. "It would cost more than the whole load is worth." With that, he hung up. So the homeowner was left with the job of splitting the logs himself. He rolled up his sleeves and set to work. About halfway through the job, he noticed that one particular log had a very large knothole which someone had plugged up. The homeowner lifted the log. It seemed unusually light and appeared to be hollow. With a hefty swing of the axe, he split the log. A blackened roll of tinfoil fell out. The homeowner stooped down, picked up the roll, and unwrapped it. To his amazement, it contained very old $50 and $100 bills. Slowly he counted them. They amounted to exactly $2,250. The bills had evidently been in the tree for many years, as the paper was very brittle. The homeowner had PMA. His only thought was to get the money back to its rightful owner. He picked up the telephone, called the wood dealer again, and asked him where he had cut this load. Again, the woodcutter's NMA asserted its repelling power. "That's nobody's business but mine," he said. "If you give away your secrets, people will cheat you every time." Despite many efforts, the homeowner never learned where the logs came from or who had sealed the money inside. Now, the point of this story does not lie in irony. It is true that the man with PMA found the money, while the man with NMA had not. But it is also true that good breaks do occur in everyone's life. However, the man who lives with NMA will prevent life's lucky breaks from benefiting him. And the man with PMA will so arrange his attitudes that he will turn even the bad breaks into advantages. On the sales staff of the Combined Insurance Company of America, there was a salesman named Al Allen. Al wanted to be the company's star salesman. He tried to apply the PMA principles found in the inspirational books and magazines he read. He read an editorial in Success Unlimited magazine entitled "Develop Inspirational Dissatisfaction." It wasn't long after that he had an opportunity to put into practice what he had read. He had a bad break. This gave him the opportunity to arrange his attitudes so that he could use the PMA side of his talisman effectively. He developed inspirational dissatisfaction. One icy winter day, Al cold canvassed every store in a city block in Wisconsin. He walked in unannounced and tried to sell insurance. On that day, Al did not make a single sale. Of course, he was dissatisfied. But Al's PMA turned this dissatisfaction into inspirational dissatisfaction. Why? He remembered the editorial he had read. He applied the principle. The next day, before setting out from the local office, he told his fellow salesman about his failures the day before. He said, "Wait and see. Today, I'm going back to call on those same prospects, and I'll sell more insurance than all the rest of you combined." And the remarkable thing is that Al did it. He went back to that same city block and again called on every person he had talked to the day before. He sold 66 new accident contracts. Now, this was an unusual achievement, and it happened because of the bad breaks when Al trudged through the sleet and wind for 8 hours without selling a single policy. Al Allen was able to rearrange his attitudes. He was able to convert the negative kind of dissatisfaction that most of us would feel in similar circumstances of failure on one day into inspirational dissatisfaction, which resulted in success the next day. Al did become the company's best salesman and was promoted to a sales manager. This ability to turn the invisible talisman over and use the side which has the force of PMA rather than the side which has the force of NMA is characteristic of so many of our really successful people. Most of us are inclined to look upon success as coming in some mysterious way through advantages that we do not have. Perhaps because we do have them, we don't see them. The obvious is often unseen. Every man's PMA is his advantage, and there is nothing mysterious about it. Henry Ford, after he had achieved success, was the subject of much envy. People felt that because of good fortune or influential friends or genius or whatever they thought was Ford's secret, because of these things, Ford was successful. And no doubt some of these elements played a part, but there was something more. Perhaps one person in every 100,000 knew the real reason for Ford's success, and those few were usually ashamed to speak of it because of its simplicity. A single glimpse of Ford in action will illustrate the secret perfectly.
You're a pizza maker in the making with an Uni pizza oven. It doesn't matter whether it's your first try or your 100th pie. Once you start making pizza, only homemade pizza will satisfy your appetite. Thick, thin, cheesy, saucy, traditional, untraditional, grandma's pizza or gram-worthy pizza. Anything you can dream up pizza. Join the community of pizza makers making pizza at uni.com.
Years ago, Henry Ford decided to develop the now famous motor known as V8. He wanted to build an engine with the entire 8 cylinders cast in one block. He instructed his engineers to produce a design for such an engine. To a man, the engineers agreed that it was simply impossible to cast an 8-cylinder gasoline engine block in one piece. Ford said, "Produce it anyway." But they replied, "It's impossible." "Go to work," Ford commanded, "and stay on the job until you succeed, no matter how much time is required." The engineers went to work. There was nothing else for them to do if they were to remain on the Ford staff. 6 months went by, and they had not succeeded. Another 6 months passed, and still no success. The more the engineers tried, the more the thing seemed impossible. At the end of the year, Ford checked with his engineers. Once again, they informed him that they had found no way to carry out his orders. "Keep working," said Ford. "I want it, and I'll have it." And what happened? Well, of course, the engine wasn't impossible at all. The Ford V8 became the most spectacularly successful car on the road, pulling Henry Ford and his company so far out in front of his nearest competitor that it took years for them to catch up. He was using PMA, and the same power is available to you. If you use it, if you turn your talisman to the right side as Henry Ford did, you too can achieve success in bringing into reality the possibility of the improbable. If you know what you want, you can find a way to get it. A man of 25 has before him some 100,000 working hours should he retire at 65. How many of your working hours will be alive with the magnificent force of PMA? And how many of them will have the life knocked out of them with the stunning blows of NMA? But how do you go about putting PMA to work in your life rather than NMA? Some people seem to use this power instinctively. When it came to developing the Ford car, Henry Ford was one of these. Others have to learn. Al Allen learned by relating and assimilating what he read in inspirational magazines and books. Success Through a Positive Mental Attitude is such a book. You too can learn to develop PMA. Some people use PMA for a while, but when they receive a setback, they lose faith in it. They start out right, but some bad breaks cause them to flip the talisman wrong side up. They fail to realize that success is maintained by those who keep trying with PMA. They are like the famous old racehorse John P. Greer. John P. Greer was a thoroughbred of great promise. Such promise, in fact, that he was groomed, trained, and billed as the only horse that stood a chance of beating the greatest racehorse of all time, Man o' War. Don't let your mental attitude make you a has-been. In the Dwyer Stakes at Aqueduct in July of 1920, the two horses finally met. It was a magnificent day. All eyes were riveted on the starting post. The two horses got away evenly. Down the track they went side by side. It was clear that John P. Greer was giving Man o' War the race of his life. At the quarter mark, they were even. The half mark, the three-quarter mark, and still they were even. At the 8th pull, neck and neck. Then in the stretch, John P. Greer brought the crowd to its feet. Slowly, he edged ahead. It was a moment of crisis for Man o' War's jockey. He made up his mind. For the first time in the great horse's career, the jockey flicked him solidly on the rump with his whip. Man o' War reacted as though the jockey had set fire to his tail. He shot out ahead and pulled away from John P. Greer as if the other horse were standing still. At the end of the race, Man o' War was 7 lengths ahead. But the significant thing from our point of view was the effect of defeat on the other horse. John P. Greer had been a horse of great spirit. Victory was in his attitude, but he was so broken by this experience that he never really recovered. All of his races afterwards were weak, half-hearted attempts, and he never won again. People are not racehorses, but this story is reminiscent of far too many men who in the boom years of the 1920s started off with a wonderful attitude of success. They achieved financial success, and then, when the Depression struck in 1930, they experienced defeat. They were crushed. Their attitude changed from positive to negative. Their talisman flipped to the side that read NMA. They stopped trying. They, like John P. Greer, became has-beens. Some people seem to use PMA pretty much all the time. Others start and then quit. But others, the vast majority of us, have never really begun to use the tremendous powers available to us. What about us? Can we learn to use PMA as we've learned other skills? The answer, based on our years of experience, is a definite yes. This is the subject of this book. In the chapters that follow, we will show you how it can be done. The effort to learn will be worth it because PMA is the essential ingredient in all success. Meet the most important living person. The day you recognize PMA for yourself is the day that you will meet the most important living person. Who is he? Why, the most important living person is you, as far as you and your life are concerned. Take a look at yourself. Isn't it true that you carry with you an invisible talisman with the initials PMA emblazoned on one side and NMA on the other? What exactly is this talisman, this force? The talisman is your mind. PMA is a positive mental attitude. A positive mental attitude is the right mental attitude. What is the right mental attitude? It is most often comprised of the plus characteristics symbolized by such words as faith, integrity, hope, optimism, courage, initiative, generosity, tolerance, tact, kindliness, and good common sense. A person with positive mental attitude aims for high goals and constantly strives to achieve them. NMA is a negative mental attitude. It has opposite characteristics to PMA. After years spent studying successful men, the authors of Success Through a Positive Mental Attitude have come to the conclusion that a positive mental attitude is the one simple secret shared by them all. It was PMA that helped S.B. Fuller overcome the disadvantages of poverty. It was PMA that motivated Tom Dempsey, despite his crippled leg, to kick the longest field goal ever kicked in a professional football game. And it was certainly a positive mental attitude that enabled Henry J. Kaiser to build a Liberty ship every 10 days. It was Al Allen's ability to turn his talisman right side up that motivated him to return to his prospects, the very ones who had refused him the day before, and set a new sales record. Do you know how to make your invisible talisman work for you? Perhaps you do. Perhaps you don't. Perhaps you have developed and strengthened your PMA until life is bringing you every worthwhile wish. But if you haven't, you can and will learn the techniques whereby you can release your power of PMA through its magic in your life as you continue to listen to this book. A positive mental attitude, what it is and how it may be developed and applied, is described throughout this book. It is the one essential principle of this book's 17 principles for achieving worthwhile success. Achievement is attained through some combination of PMA with one or more of the other 16 success principles. Master them. Begin applying each of them as you recognize them while listening to Success Through a Positive Mental Attitude. When you make each principle a part of your life, yours will be a positive mental attitude in its most powerful form. And the payoff will be success, health, happiness, wealth, or whatever definite aims you may have in life. These will be yours, provided you don't violate the laws of infinite intelligence and the rights of your fellow men. Such violations are the most repellent forms of NMA. In Chapter 2, you will find the formula by which you may keep your mind positive. Master that formula. Apply it in all that you do, and you will be on your way to the attainment of your every desire.
You already know who it is, Megan Thee Stallion, and I'm just here to remind you to love on yourself. Do you want to be cheap?
Pilot number 1. Thoughts to steer by. 1. Meet the most important living person. That person is you. Your success, health, happiness, wealth depend on how you use your invisible talisman. How will you use it? The choice is yours. 2. Your mind is your invisible talisman. The letters PMA, positive mental attitude, are emblazoned on one side, and NMA, negative mental attitude, on the other. These are powerful forces. PMA is the right mental attitude for each specific occasion. It has the power to attract the good and the beautiful. NMA repels them. It is a negative mental attitude that robs you of all that makes life worth living. Self-question. How can I develop the right mental attitude? Be specific. 3. Don't blame God for your lack of success. Like S.B. Fuller, you can develop a burning desire to succeed. How? Keep your mind on the things you want and off the things you don't want. How? 4. Like S.B. Fuller, read the Bible and inspirational books for a purpose. Ask for divine guidance. Search for the light. Self-question. Do you believe it's proper to ask for divine guidance? 5. Every adversity has the seed of an equivalent or greater benefit for those who have PMA. Sometimes the things that seem to be adversities turn out to be opportunities in disguise. Tom Dempsey discovered this as a cripple. Self-question. Will you engage in thinking time to determine how you can turn adversities into seeds of equivalent or greater benefits? 6. Accept the priceless gift, the joy of work. Apply the greatest value in life. Love people and serve them. Like Henry J. Kaiser, you will attract big and generous portions of success. You can if you develop PMA. Self-question. Will you search to find out how you can develop PMA as you continue to listen to this book? 7. Never underestimate the repellent power of a negative mental attitude. It can prevent life's lucky breaks from benefiting you. Self-question. PMA attracts good luck. How can I develop the habit of PMA? 8. You can profit by disappointment if it is turned into inspirational dissatisfaction with PMA. Like Al Allen, develop inspirational dissatisfaction. Rearrange your attitudes and convert a failure of one day into success on another. How do you think you can develop inspirational dissatisfaction? 9. Bring into reality the possibility of the improbable by acquiring PMA. Say to yourself, as Henry Ford said to his engineers, keep working. Self-question. Have you the courage to aim high and strive daily to keep your goal before you? 10. Don't let your mental attitude make you a has-been. When you become successful and a depression or any other unfavorable circumstance arises which causes you a loss or defeat, act on the self-motivator. Success is achieved by those who try and maintained by those who keep trying with PMA. This is the way to avoid being crushed. Universal principles in self-motivator form. Every adversity has the seed of an equivalent or greater benefit. Greatness comes to those who develop a burning desire to achieve high goals. Success is achieved and maintained by those who try and keep on trying with PMA. To become an expert achiever in any human activity, it takes practice, practice, practice. Man's greatest power lies in the power of prayer. Chapter 2. You can change your world. We now know that PMA is a positive mental attitude, and we also know that a positive mental attitude is one of the 17 success principles. When you begin to apply a combination of these principles with PMA in your chosen occupation or to a solution of your personal problems, you are on the road to success. Then you are on the right track and headed in the right direction toward getting what you want. To achieve anything worthwhile in life, it is imperative that you apply PMA, regardless of what other success principles you employ. PMA is the catalyst which makes any combination of success principles work to attain a worthwhile end. It is NMA, combined with some of the same principles, that is the catalyst which results in crime or evil. And grief, disaster, tragedy, sin, disease, death are some of its rewards. 17 Success Principles. The authors have for many years given lectures, instructed classes, and conducted a correspondence course on the 17 Success Principles. The title of the course, PMA, The Science of Success. These 17 principles are: 1. A positive mental attitude. 2. Definiteness of purpose. 3. Going the extra mile. 4. Accurate thinking. 5. Self-discipline. 6. The mastermind. 7. Applied faith. 8. A pleasing personality. 9. Personal initiative. 10. Enthusiasm. 11. Controlled attention. 12. Teamwork. 13. Learning from defeat. 14. Creative vision. 15. Budgeting time and money. 16. Maintaining sound physical and mental health. 17. Using cosmic habit force, universal law. These 17 success principles are no creation of the authors. They were extracted from the lifetime experiences of hundreds of the most successful persons our nation has known during the past century. As long as you live, from this day forward, you can analyze your every success and every failure. That is, if you imprint these 17 principles indelibly in your memory. You may develop and maintain a permanent positive mental attitude by making it your responsibility to adopt and apply these 17 principles in your daily living. There is no other known method by which you may keep your mind positive. Analyze yourself courageously now and learn which of these 17 principles you have been using and which of them you have been neglecting. In the future, analyze both your successes and your failures using the 17 principles as a measuring device. And very soon, you will be able to lay your finger on what has been holding you back. If you have PMA and don't succeed, then what? If you use PMA and don't succeed, it may be because you are not using each of the principles that are necessary in the combination for success to attain your specific goal. You may wish to check the stories of S.B. Fuller, Tom Dempsey, Henry J. Kaiser, the Woodcutter, Al Allen, and Henry Ford to recognize which of the 17 success principles each person applied or neglected to apply. You might analyze someone you know who is a has-been in real life. As you read the case histories in the chapters which follow, do the same thing. Ask yourself, which of the 17 success principles are used? Which are omitted? At first, it may be difficult to understand and apply the principles, But as you continue to listen to success through a positive mental attitude, each of these principles will become more clear to you. You will then be able to use them. When you get to Chapter 20, you will be able to check yourself accurately by the 17 success principles. There you will find a self-analysis chart under the heading Success Quotient Analysis. Has the world given you a raw deal? The students who have enrolled in the PMA Science of Success course have often been people who consider themselves failures in some area of their lives. The very first question such a person might be asked when he enters this class is, why? Why are you taking this course? Why haven't you had the success you would like to have? And the reasons which they give tell us a tragic story about the causes of failure. I never really had a chance to get ahead. My father was an alcoholic, you know. I was raised in the slums, and that's something you can never get out of your system. I only had a grammar school education. These people are all saying, in essence, that the world has given them a raw deal. They are blaming the world and circumstances outside themselves for their failures. They blame their heredity or their environment. They start out with a negative mental attitude. And of course, with that attitude, they are handicapped. But it is NMA that is holding them down, not the external handicap which they give as the cause of their failure. A lesson learned from a child. There's a wonderful little story about a minister who one Saturday morning was trying to prepare his sermon under difficult conditions. His wife was out shopping. It was a rainy day, and his young son was restless and bored with nothing to do. Finally, in desperation, the minister picked up an old magazine and thumbed through it until he came to a large, brightly colored picture. It showed a map of the world. He tore the page from the magazine, ripped it into little bits, and threw the scraps all over the living room floor with the words, "Johnny, if you can put this all together, I'll give you a quarter." The preacher thought this would take Johnny most of the morning, but within 10 minutes there was a knock on his study door. It was his son with the completed puzzle. The minister was amazed to see Johnny finish so soon, with the pieces of paper neatly arranged and the map of the world back in order. "Son, how did you get that done so fast?" the preacher asked. "Oh," said Johnny, "it was easy. On the other side, there was a picture of a man. I just put a piece of paper on the bottom, put the picture of the man together, put a piece of paper on top, and then turned it over. I figured that if I got the man right, the world would be right." The minister smiled and handed his son a quarter. "And you've given me my sermon for tomorrow, too," he said. "If a man is right, his world will be right." There's a great lesson in this idea. If you are unhappy with your world and want to change it, the place to start is with yourself. If you are right, your world will be right. This is what PMA is all about. When you have a positive mental attitude, the problems of your world tend to bow before you. You were born a champion. Have you ever thought about the battles you won before you were born? Stop and think about yourself, says Amram Scheinfeld, an expert on genetics. In all the history of the world, there was never anyone else exactly like you. And in all the infinity of time to come, there will never be another. You are a very special person, and many struggles took place that had to be successfully concluded in order to produce you. Just think, tens of millions of sperm cells participated in a great battle, yet only one of them won, the one that made you. It was a great race to reach a single object, a precious egg containing a tiny nucleus. This goal for which the sperms were competing was smaller in size than the point of a needle, and each sperm was so small that it would have to be magnified thousands of times before it could be seen by the human eye. Yet it is on this microscopic level that your life's most decisive battle was fought. The head of each of the millions of sperms contained a precious cargo of 24 chromosomes, just as there were 24 in the tiny nucleus of the egg. Each chromosome was composed of jelly-like beads closely strung together. Each bead contained hundreds of genes to which scientists attribute all the factors of your heredity. The chromosomes in the sperm comprised all the hereditary material and tendencies contributed by your father and his ancestors. Those in the egg nucleus, the inheritable traits of your mother and her ancestors. Your mother and father themselves represented the culmination of over 2 billion years of victory in the battle to survive. And then one particular sperm, the fastest, the healthiest, the winner, united with the waiting egg to form one tiny living cell. The life of the most important living person had begun. You had become a champion over the most staggering odds you will ever have to face. For all practical purposes, you had inherited from the vast reservoir of the past all the potential abilities and powers you need to achieve your objectives. You were born to be a champion, and no matter what obstacles and difficulties lie in your way, they are not 1/10 so great as the ones that have already been overcome at the moment of your conception. Victory is built in to every living person. Take the case of Irving Ben Cooper, who was one of America's most respected judges. But this was very far from the way young Ben Cooper thought of himself as a young boy. How a frightened boy developed PMA. Ben grew up in a near-slum neighborhood in St. Joseph, Missouri. His father was an immigrant tailor who earned little money. Many days there simply wasn't enough to eat. To heat their small home, Ben used to take a coal scuttle and walk down to the railroad tracks that ran nearby. There he would pick up pieces of coal. It embarrassed Ben to have to do it. He'd often try to sneak through the back streets so children from school wouldn't see him. But they often did. There was one gang of boys in particular who found great sport in ambushing Ben on his way home from the tracks and beating him up. They would scatter his coal all over the street and send him home with tears streaming from his eyes. Thus it was that Ben lived in a more or less permanent state of fear and self-despising. Something happened, as it always must when we break the pattern of defeat. The victory within us does not assert itself until we are ready. Ben was inspired to positive action because he read a book. It was Robert Coverdale's Struggle by Horatio Alger. In it, Ben read the adventures of a youngster like himself who was faced with great odds, but who overcame these odds with the courage and moral strength which Ben wished to possess. The boy read every one of the Horatio Alger books he could borrow. As he read, he lived the part of the hero. All winter, he sat in the cold kitchen reading stories of courage and success, unconsciously absorbing a positive mental attitude. Some months after he read his first Horatio Alger book, Ben Cooper was again making a trip down to the railroad tracks. Off in the distance, he saw 3 figures dart behind a building. His first thought was to turn and run. Then he remembered the courage that he had admired in his book heroes, and instead of turning, his hand gripped the coal scuffle more tightly, and he marched straight ahead, as if he were one of the Alger heroes. It was a brutal fight. The 3 boys jumped Ben all at the same time. His bucket dropped, and he started flailing his arms with a determination that caught the bullies by surprise. Ben's right hand smashed into the lips and nose of one of the boys, his left hand into his stomach. To Ben's surprise, the boy stopped fighting and turned and ran. Meanwhile, the other 2 boys were hitting and kicking him. Ben managed to push one boy away and knock the other down. He jumped on the second boy with his knees, while he plowed punch after punch into his stomach and jaw as if he were mad. Now there was just one boy left. This was the leader. He had jumped on top of Ben. Ben managed to pull him aside and get on his feet. For a second, the 2 boys stood and looked each other squarely in the eyes. And then, bit by bit, the leader stepped backwards. He too ran away. Perhaps it was righteous indignation, but Ben picked up a chunk of coal and threw it at the retreater. It wasn't until then that Ben realized that his nose was bleeding and that he had black and blue marks on his body from the punches and kicks he had received. It was worth it. It was a great day in Ben's life. In that moment, he overcame fear. Ben Cooper wasn't much stronger than he had been a year earlier. His attackers were no less tough. The difference came in Ben's own mental attitude. He had faced danger in spite of fear. He decided that no longer was he going to be pushed around by bullies. From now on, he himself was going to change his world. And of course, this is exactly what he did. Identify yourself with a successful image. The boy gave himself an identity. When he fought the 3 bullies on the street that day, he was not fighting as frightened, undernourished Ben Cooper. He was fighting as Robert Coverdale, or any other of the plucky and daring heroes of Horatio Alger's books. Identifying oneself with a successful image can help break the habits of self-doubt and defeat which years of NMA set up within a personality. Another and equally important successful technique for changing your world is to identify yourself with an image that will inspire you to make the right decisions. It can be a slogan, a picture, or any other symbol that is meaningful to you. What will your picture say to you? The president of a Midwest concern operating internationally was visiting his San Francisco office. He noticed a large photograph of himself on the wall of the office of Dorothy Jones, a private secretary. "Dottie, that's a rather large picture for this size room, isn't it?" he asked. Dorothy responded, "When I have a problem, do you know what I do?" Without waiting for an answer, she demonstrated by placing her elbows on her desk, propping her head on the fingers of her folded hands, and looking up at the picture. "Boss, how the heck would you solve this problem?" she asked. Dottie's remarks seem rather humorous, yet the essence of her idea is startling. Perhaps you have a picture in your office, your home, or in your wallet that could give you the right answer to an important question in your life. Yours may be a picture of your mother, father, wife, husband, of Benjamin Franklin or Abraham Lincoln. It may be that of a saint. What will your picture say to you? There's one way to find out. When you are faced with a serious problem or decision, ask your picture a question. Listen for the answer. Another essential ingredient for changing your world is to have definiteness of purpose, one of the 17 principles of success.
Napoleon Hill's Keys to Success is the most practical and revealing examination of the 17 principles of success that Napoleon Hill ever wrote. These 17 principles are the essence of the action and attitudes of everyone who has ever had a lasting accomplishment. If you make them your actions and attitudes, you will realize every one of your worthwhile goals. The work of a lifetime. Andrew Carnegie, the founder of a steel corporation that later helped form U.S. Steel and a great philanthropist, charged the young Napoleon Hill with what was to be his life's work, the assembling and analyzing of the qualities that had allowed the great figures of the early United States to achieve their lasting success. Armed only with introductions from Carnegie and a fierce determination, Hill set out to interview more than 500 of these titans and distill their philosophies into a logical framework. From men such as Henry Ford, Thomas Edison, Woodrow Wilson, and later Franklin Roosevelt, Hill gained invaluable insights. He also learned about the limitations each faced. He found Ford personally insufferable. He encountered and understood Edison's struggles with near-deafness. And though he had worked hard for FDR during the Great Depression to combat the national malaise, he disagreed strongly with many of the president's programs. Hill believed they placed too little emphasis on individual effort and lured Americans into relying on others instead of on themselves. But by observing, working, and talking with these people, Hill learned priceless lessons that were much greater than the sum of his subjects' accomplishments. Though Hill had already published a number of books which revealed his findings in broad detail and enjoyed commercial success, his crowning achievement was the publication of the all-time best-selling business inspirational book, Think and Grow Rich, in 1937. This clear, concise elucidation of the way to success was an immediate sensation. It lays out the techniques of personal achievement in everyday language, full of examples and exhortations. More than 50 years later, supported by the work of the Napoleon Hill Foundation, Napoleon Hill's masterwork still finds thousands of new admirers every year, people whose lives are infinitely changed for the better. Hill continued to refine his philosophy, sharpening his focus as his wisdom grew, as he met even more people whose lives had been built on the ideas he had outlined. The major outlet for his new knowledge was a veritable whirlwind of speeches, lectures, and articles he prepared over the next 30 years. He spent his life spreading the gospel of success as directly and as personally as he could. Unfortunately, so much of the additional intelligence that Napoleon Hill developed was not published in book form. While he persisted in speaking all through his vigorous retirement, the hundreds of thousands of people who discovered Think and Grow Rich after Hill's death in 1970 have not had the advantage of his guidance on the many more.
She my little dog, she my best friend, and I got big shoes, this ain't no size 10. The way I'm rocking it, the way I'm walking in, the way I'm walking in. Cause she my little dog, she my best friend, and I got big shoes, this ain't no size 10. The way I'm rocking it, the way I'm walking in, the way I'm walking in.